All right. Good morning, everybody. We're getting, a lot of jump ins, a lot of note takers and everything, but I did want to get started. It's right at 11 o'clock. So just want to appreciate and respect everybody's time. So glad to have everybody be here. Just for those of you that were here on Tuesday, we have moved over to a meeting format versus a webinar format. So a couple things you'll see differently than last time is that the chat window works. And so you can use the chat window. I'll try to monitor it to the best of my ability. I've got it on another screen here, but we'll do our best to address any questions there. And then I think secondarily as well, you should be able to unmute yourself, and we'll get in, kind of more of the interactive towards the end. But if for whatever reason you can't unmute yourself, just let me know. I know I tested it yesterday, and we can no problem unmuting people. So. With that, I think we're going to get started. Kind of before I demo, there's just one thing I wanted to share with everybody. Yesterday, and you'll see this if you're kind of on LinkedIn today, there's a lot of chatter or messages going around specifically about Outlook. So I posted in the WhatsApp a video from a couple different people in the industry. Brandon Charlson, who's a friend of mine, shared that with me and with the group we're in, and I wanted to share it with this group. So again, it's not doomsday by any means, but I think it's well worth watching the video because there's a lot of different experts in the industry that are seeing significant impacts with Outlook. So it's I think even the founder of SmartLead is in the video talking about some of the testing they're doing and everything. So again, I'm not the apocalypse type guy, but I definitely would say, take a few minutes if you get a chance, watch that video, and, just be aware of what's going on, right? Because if you have Outlook accounts, they're seeing things like 20 or 30% bounce rates on some accounts. They're saying that on, direct purchase accounts, not necessarily reseller accounts. So if you've been around a little while, we saw this with Zoho. You see these ups and downs specifically with Google. I know apocalypse wishful does sound spicy, Adam, but I'm all about let's give you the information, right? And there's some great conversation I think yesterday and this morning in the WhatsApp group about it, but just encourage you to take in as much information as you can, and then do what you can or do what you want to with that information. So with that, I think we're going to get on to kind of why we're here. And yesterday when I shared on LinkedIn kind of what we were going to cover today, I really had one thing in mind, and that was finding emails from LinkedIn profiles. So today we're going to talk about how to do that. But then this morning I just decided, let's do Google business profiles as well. And the real reason why that's important is because they're kind of two different audiences, right? I mean, you can go into LinkedIn and find, individual profiles, but then I have a lot of conversations with people as well where they're just like, I've got this Google profile list because that's where a lot of small business owners are, but I don't have a name, I don't have an email, right? Because that data is not in the GBP data. So I wanted to kind of build out a profile there as well and have a table for you guys to share. I definitely don't think it's as easy because you don't have the name, whereas you do in LinkedIn. But really the purpose of this is to say, is there an alternative to going out to a certain email provider, whether that be like Apollo or whether that be like, it doesn't matter, like instantly, there's tons of email providers, right? Is there an alternative to finding that data and then getting that email, right? Because why I use both of those tools and have used both those tools that I named, they're great tools. There's other use cases for utilizing Clay, for example, because you can pull in LinkedIn profiles or you can pull in Google business profiles. So we're going to walk through both of these workflows. We're going to talk about a tool called ICPs that's built into Clay. I was actually unaware of the tool until about a week or two ago. And then I had an interesting exchange yesterday, or I guess last night and this morning with the founder that was pure accident. So I think this is going to be kind of a cool little, coincidental demo. But let me start with first finding emails from LinkedIn profiles. So let me get into sharing the screen here. And yeah, Adam, I agree. And I'm going to show you how cool he is. So it's kind of exciting. Um, so here's the idea. We're going to kind of start from the beginning, but I want to show you what the completed table looks like first before we actually run one. So what we're doing here is we're importing LinkedIn profiles using Clay. And when you do that, you get a last name, a first name. You don't always get the domain, but most of the time you do. And then this is ICPs. So we're taking first name, last name, and domain, plugging that into ICPs, and we're getting an email. So this validation I added here was just because I'd never really used ICPs. So I want to make sure that these emails validated. I'm very confident with it now because I've yet to see an email that didn't validate with 0 bounce. And so I know please don't get me wrong, these aren't endorsements of products. I know there's other validators that people use. I know there's other sources to find emails. This is just what I used, and predominantly it was cost, right? It was like, how cost effective can we make this and really get from a free import in Clay all the way out to research and copy, right? So I'm going to walk you through that. And then we take, I just left this in there to show that these emails validate. We go and we do research, and we're going to talk about that. We get some output, and then from there we introduce an offer. So I have an offer that I created. I just kind of wrote it just to show. And then we're going to use GPT-4 Omni to create copy. And the nice thing is when you look at this workflow from beginning to end, these are the total cost, right? So we're going to 1.3 cents, 1.4 cents. So I have done this for a long time. I have pulled in leads from all kinds of sources. I have built workflow after workflow of research and copy using all kinds of different models, all kinds of different email validation sources, email sources themselves. This is by far the most cost effective I've ever been able to make it, right? So that's why I was wanting to share it, because at the end of the day, like from getting a validated email to using AI to enhance the research to creating copy with AI all the way down to be able to do that for 1.4 cents, that was a revelation for me. So I thought it was worth sharing, because there are a lot of people who can't pay $1,000 like I do for their Clay account, right? So I wanted to give people another alternative, especially because you can import LinkedIn profiles and GVPs in Clay. So as we go through this and we show you live how this works, I'm going to delete these just for sake of giving you real-time data. The one caveat I want to throw out with this process is it is not as clean as it looks, meaning I built it to be clean, but we're not going to find the email for everybody. Not everybody's going to have a domain. And so don't let that discourage you, because this is purely a volume game, right? So this is not the process you're going to use if you want to build a hyper-personalized lead list, because you're going to lose results in this process. We're not going to find domains. We're not going to find emails, right? This is the clean version of that. So in this particular table, for example, if I unfilter it before I delete it, if I take that off, what you're going to see is that I started with 25 columns and I ended up with 5, right? So this is definitely a process where you're taking the best of what you can get here because of the cost to get from beginning to end. So again, not advocating that this is the end all be all by any means, just want to give people another way to use some of the free tools to get all the way from beginning to end without necessarily using 7, 10 Clay credits just to find an email, if that makes sense. So, and if you've done that process or gone about finding emails other ways, you can probably attest to the fact that you run into the exact same issues of what you find and don't find. You just don't always know that, because if you go to Apollo, for example, or you go to another source, you're going to put in a query and you're not necessarily going to see what they don't return you. You only see what they give you back. But behind the scenes, this is what's happening too, where it's like they're just displaying the results of what they returned. So again, I'm happy with it because I know it's a volume game. I know I can go do a query on anything in LinkedIn or do a query on GBP. And if I'm getting 20% of those all the way from first research to validated email, then that's something. So anyway, I wanted to give you the behind the scenes of this, and now we're going to do it live. And so let's just take these off for a minute. We'll delete the rows. And so if all you had was this table, right? And I'm going to share this table with you. This is the process you would go through, right? So we're going to come in, and with this table, you can, if you were starting from scratch, you would just hit import and you'd say find people. because I'm going to share this table with you, I'll show you a little bit of an easier way. You can come to this plus sign right here, and it's going to pull up the same table, right? So that way you don't have to worry about adding another row or another column in here. And a couple things you should know about this is you could import a CSV list of just people. If you had another table with all of those people, you could pull from that other table, and that's what these options are here. So let's just say you've got a list from somebody else or from another tool of LinkedIn profiles. You could select that table here and point to that table. So there's a lot of different options here. But if you weren't going to do any of that and you were just going to start from scratch, then you would filter like you would normally filter in LinkedIn, right? So that's what we're going to do here. We're just going to type founder as an example, and then we'll just pick a location. So I was born in Houston, Texas, so we'll pick Houston. And for the sake of time, we're going to limit the results and we'll just do 25, right? So we'll run a similar test and see what happens. So we hit 25, we hit preview people, and we should get a result pretty quickly. Yesterday, I tried to run every founder in the US, and I think it timed out at like 2 million. So be specific, with how many you want to pull into a table. But as you can see really quickly, we got names, company name, founder, job title, location, LinkedIn. So we're going to import that real quick. We'll import it to the current table, and now we're going to load that data. Now, I will tell you what I've done with these tables is I've written formulas so that things don't run unless the previous thing happened the way it should have. And so I'll show you how I did that in just a second. But as you can see already, what's happening here is real-time example, right? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with the domain, right? So we've already lost 17 of them because we need the domain. Like trying to go out and find this person without their company they work for. There's ways to do that, but it's definitely not as easy and cost effective in this process, right? So you can already see that these find work emails are running through ICPs. And the nice thing I've learned about ICPs, honestly, is that you only get charged if they verify, if they find the email. So that's pretty cool. I haven't really seen that much. You do get charged for, if you do just verification, you get charged whether it's positive or negative. But if you do a find email, it's only if they find it. So while this is running, I want to show you a little bit more about ICPs because I realize I haven't dove into that too much. Here's the website. I went in and signed in and set up an account. And a couple things about ICPs is number one, it is built into Clay. And so if we come back to the Clay table here, this is just an enrichment. If you wanted to add it to other tables, all you'd have to do is hit add enrichment, type IC is probably all you have to type, and hit find work email. And then if I did that, this would come in here. And then like other enrichments, there's really two ways to go about it. You can use Clay's ICP's key, or you can use your own. And whatever option you choose, I would recommend definitely you use your own. I don't even know why I don't have that checked here. I should, because I have an account, which clearly is not mapped. So I'm going to show you, for sake of probably having to change my API call or API code, but I'm going to show you how to map it because you should know how to do this, right? So if you want to use your own ICP account, you would come in to sign up. You would do a single, you would be taking this menu, you go to the settings. You obviously have to purchase some credits, and then you go to, I believe it's your profile and API key. Please don't steal my API key. We'll cut and paste it, and we will put it in Clay. Add an account. It looks like it's asking for my username and password, so I don't even know if I remember that. So I'll have to figure that out later. I thought I could just put my API key in there, but let me see. Let me just see if I can do it on the fly here. Hopefully it doesn't display my password on the screen. Oh, it is. Okay, I'll type quick. All right, so mapped. So who cares, right? Change password. But you can see right here, I've now mapped it. So the diving in a little bit deeper to ICPs and kind of why I like them is number one, they're very affordable. So if you go into pricing here, you can see. So I had to do a little like, transition of cost because obviously this is not in US dollars. But this comes out to be about 271, so it's not a huge transition. But at scale, this is ridiculously cost effective. And so finding 100,000 emails, you know, all right. Thank you, Grant. Good thing is I'll run it with Clay credits just so we don't have any issues. So I think it's, if this is a good, price point. The thing is, I'm going to be honest, I haven't looked at like every tool, so there may be better price points out there, right? I just saw this as, depending on your volume, like this is, from what I've seen, pretty reasonable, and it works, and it was easy, right? So number one, I have no affiliate key for this, so this is not me endorsing them. This is just what I use for this workflow. But it was new to me. I thought it was very cost effective from what I've seen in the past. So again, use it if it makes sense for you. There's definitely other verifiers, and then there's definitely other email providers. But you would choose a plan. I think I chose the 4,000 credits plan, if I recall. And then you map your API key, right? You can also, like with everything in Clay, you can use one Clay credit instead. And I think that's what I had set. And to pull the data in, you need a name. So you can see I mapped the name column, and then I need a domain. And then you also have the option to include catch-alls. Some people do, and then re-verify them through like other sources. I chose, for the sake of this, not to. And as you can see at the end result, we started with 25, we ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So almost what we had on the last one, a little less than 20%, but not bad. I think all of this, at least to this point, if I didn't do anything else, this would have cost me, I don't know, 3.2 cents if I'm doing the math correctly. So, or 2.4 cents. So pretty ridiculously cheap. Funny thing, let me see if I still have the email up here. So this is the founder of ICPs. I don't know him by any means, but I thought it was pretty cool because he sends me this email last night, and I'm just assuming like, I'm a cold emailer, right? A lot of us are. So I'm assuming like this is totally, a newsletter script kind of thing, right? There's no way he writes this email to me for himself, right? So he says, "Hello, Josh. According to our users, our pricing table is not very easy to understand," which that made me laugh. He said, "We're working hard to improve it. In the meantime, let's make it simple. This is our pricing, right? 0.1 credit, whatever the outcome is, and then email discovery, 1 credit charged only when an email is found." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool," because I really didn't know that when I signed up. I assumed it was just 1 credit regardless. And then he's like, "Let's make it simpler, blah, blah, blah," right? So just out of spite, you can see the times, like this is 8:17 last night. So I wrote back to him, and I says, "Pierre, your pricing table is clear, your product's great. Don't change a thing. I'm about to teach 280 business tomorrow how to use your tool connecting to Clay," which, obviously there's not 280 calls, but, it's going to be recorded. It's going to put in the consortium, right? And honestly, when I wrote this, I was like, nobody's going to reply to this, right? This is a spam, not spam, but it's like a newsletter type. You just signed up for something type email, right? So he writes back to me. He says, "Hey, Josh, thanks for the message. Super glad that you're going to present ICPs. If I can help, here's 500 sign-up credits." So he did. And then he's a FYI, we're releasing sales nav. So again, I know a lot of people in this industry. I don't know him, but like, I thought it was pretty cool. So he gave me this list, and I'm going to Lynn, who's on my team. He is in the consortium. He is also in the group. My thing to all of you is that he's offered us 500 credits to anybody that's interested. I promise you, he's not, to my knowledge, there's not even an affiliate link. So you saw the email that he sent, you saw the attachment. So if you want those 500 credits, just message Lynn, and we'll give you that link that he gave us. So I thought it was a cool thing, and it did very little to earn it other than just write back to him to an email. So I learned a lesson from him. Maybe that's something I'll do going forward. So thought it was cool. But kind of back to the table itself. So Really quickly, what happens here is we would take these emails. I would filter by the columns that I actually got an email on. So let me do that real quick. And just so I could look at a clean list, and we'll just say it's not empty. So there's the actual list with just the validated emails. And then as you can see, I have these chained together, right? So if you look at the next one here, I have it where it's not going to run unless we get an email. So this is one of the ways you save cost, right? You can have this run as things happen, like as we get an email, it can take the next step. But if you're not familiar enough with Clay to know that with conditional formulas, you can prompt other columns to run. So as long as you leave it on auto update and then you tell it, and if I look at, how I wrote this with AI, this email is not null. So it will not run unless the email is not null, which means an email exists. So I don't pay any cost on this run unless it gets an email. And then that's how you keep columns from, they can run automatically, but then you can also make sure that while they run automatically, that you're not paying for stuff you shouldn't pay. And it's just through that formula option. So a little bit about what we do here. So we do a little bit of research. This is a dynamic column that pulls in the website. So here's that company's website, and we ask it for 3 or 4 paragraphs of research. If you've seen any of the stuff I've done in the past, this is the approach we take. And then this is an API call to Cohere. So this is not built into Clay. So this is one of those things that if you want to use this workflow to do research, I am a huge fan of Cohere. They're the only large language model I know on the planet that is used by both Google and Microsoft. And when people that build billion-dollar models use something else, that should tell you something. But the reason why we use Cohere is because number one, it's very affordable. And then number two, you have the ability to prompt and do things like research. And even if they're public, look at LinkedIn profiles, et cetera. And through this API call, you can append that search directly to that domain. So what it does is it goes very, very deep in the domain and the website you give it, but it does not go out to the web. So if you use, and I'm a huge fan of ClayGent, it has its own use cases, right? But one of the challenges you will always run into, at least today with ClayGent, is that it doesn't matter if you're using OpenAI or some Claude models that are now built into ClayGent, that you will be limited by the fact that depending on how you write your prompt, it could go out and do a web search or Google search and pull back erroneous information. So one of the reasons, or the main reason why we use Cohere, is because it's built to be an enterprise grade model and not hallucinate. So, and if you use this exact prompt, it will not hallucinate because it's only going to, and that's what this config does, directly to the domain you provide it and doing deep research based off your prompt and nowhere else. So that's a long-winded explanation, but that's why we use Cohere. Plus it gives great results, right? So if you're going to use this table, the one thing you would need to do is get your own API key. And that's pretty easy. You just go to Cohere. And this is worth a few minutes showing you because we use Cohere a lot. And, try now, sign up. The other thing I really like about Cohere is that they don't rate limit. I mean, I think they do, but I haven't run into any issues with them. So like if you're using OpenAI, there's 5 tiers and you have to climb to the right tier. If you're using Claude, like if you try to use Claude's API key in Clay, like you have to go pre-purchase a certain amount of credits to run into rate limits. So with Cohere, I have not ever run into an issue of rate limits, and I've run tables of like 10,000 different rows at a time. It's pretty easy though. You come into Cohere, you can, obviously dive around. They're doing a lot of good stuff with embedding and other technologies, but you basically come in here, you ask for a production key. Their billing's pretty straightforward. You can see, all of your billing. Their dashboard gives you access to some of their other models like Command R Plus, and you can play around with their playground. Like it is a very enterprise grade technology, but it's also very well built. So I'll kind of show you the main webpage here, where you can, just have, you can see who their clients are on the screen. And just test different things like embedding. Do you want to upload a table of your own data to make your prompts better? They make that all really easy. So just a lot of things you can do with them. But For this use case, we're using them to pull in the research, and you just need to update your API key here where it says bearer. And again, I know mine's there, so I'll take it out when I share the table, but you'd put yours there. And I'm big on transparency when it comes to cost, right? So I've done the work for you in the table. Here's the output tokens. Here's the input tokens. We've written the calculation. And so you can see, and here's the number one argument I would make to people, like, what kind of tool can you find that does accurate research that charges you, I don't even know, 6/1000th of a cent, right? So pretty detailed for what we ask it. If we have it go deeper and do more stuff, then it's going to get, a little bit more expensive, but most of my Cohere runs are easily, in this range. And the research is good, right? So if I come in here, this is the kind of output it's given, and just giving me very good details about the company. This is some Viking company or Renaissance company. Come in here as well, completely different detail. And so the method I teach to a lot of my clients and to a lot of people, if you're curious about this apology presence, if the model does not complete for whatever reason, there's any kind of issue, it will always kindly say, I'm sorry. So I just wrote a formula to identify those, and formulas can be your best friend and save you a lot of money. But what I did is I just came in here and used AI and said, contains apologize, I'm sorry, unfortunately unable, if so, yes, if not, no. So that was a quick way for me to filter down if it does have an error. You don't really need that if you're running 4 rows, but if you're running 4,000, you probably want to be able to figure out, like, is there an error here somewhere? Did it give, the nice thing about Cohere is it won't regurgitate bad information, but if it can't find it, it will tell you, like, I'm sorry, I'm sure. Is it easy to remove the sure? I'd be delighted to. Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's just the way I wrote the prompt, Adam. So if you look at the prompt, like, I told it to take the persona of a reporter, visit the website, applies 3 or 4 paragraphs. So the way I get around that is just rewriting the prompt differently. Like, because I'm telling it to take a persona, which I will tell you from a prompt writing perspective, I've written some pretty ridiculously robust prompts. If you want your prompts to be better, tell them right away to be somebody else and then go do what you want them to do. So that's why I use this terminology, take the persona. Great trick with most of these large language models, even in ChatGPT, tell it to go be somebody, have a conversation with it. You're going to get totally different output than if you just say, go do this, because the models are, I don't know how to explain it, but they're essentially trained in the way that they can assume personas. And so the persona aspect of this just makes the output better. Let's see. So we get the research. I told you about the apology presence. The R offer thing, you notice that's blank. I do have it loaded in the table here. So to get this to populate, I could obviously cut and paste it, but simple thing about text columns, if you put your text in the settings of the column and you want it to populate, if it doesn't for whatever reason, you can just make it like a small change. So I'm going to take off implementations, hit save, and it will update the columns. And because this rest of this is triggered to run off our offer, then it's now going to automatically run. So a couple things, again, I'm not advocating you use my copy method. People do and it works, but everybody needs to take copy kind of from their own approach. I'm just showing you that you can write very dynamic copy, and it was all based off my offer and specifically the company's research. So that's what we did, is we combined the research and the offer as a sample, that I can create very dynamic professional copy with AI. And we do that. I'll show you, just 4 examples. They're all different. They specifically speak from an offer relation to the company's perspective. And everyone, I'm just showing you, like this one, this is a company that obviously is involved in the EEOC, that speaks to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and et cetera, right? It's, it's negligible whether I should be making an offer to some of these companies or not, but this is just a sample table. So as you can see, just totally different approaches, every single one, and that's kind of how we approach copy. But more importantly, the cost of doing that, especially with GPT-4 Omni, I used to tell people, use Claude Opus for copy. Now we're using GPT-4 Omni because it's better. little bit, not much. As far as copy, it's negligible, but it's definitely more cost effective, right? So you can see to create these copies was 0.6 of a cent, and total cost of the whole workflow from importing it into LinkedIn all the way to creating copy and doing research is 0.0134, 0.0133, et cetera. So it definitely does work, and just kind of gives you, I would tell you, don't do what I do. Take what I do and make it better with your own twist, right? If you learn anything from today is you can get emails from LinkedIn profiles. You can do it remotely, cost effectively, and then you can add your own spin to it. Maybe you want to pull down their LinkedIn profile summary and mix that in with a little bit of research, right? If everybody's doing what I do, then we're probably not all going to get results. But lead targeting, copy, those are all different approaches. But just here is a way that at least now if you didn't know, that cost effectively it's possible to get data directly from LinkedIn. So that's table one. Table two, I'm not going to spend as much time on because it's very similar, except this time we're pulling data from GPPs, right? So give you a quick rundown, pull in business profile data here. And how you do that, if you were going to do that from the beginning, same thing. You can go to import, except this time you could do find local businesses. And that's how you would start if you had nothing in your table. Since I already have some stuff in the table, and since it's basically the same thing, I'm going to show you another way to do it, which is you hit the plus sign here. I really love this integration because if you are someone who targets local businesses, this is killer. Because it works identical. It works off the Google API, number one, and it works identical to how you would do a search like on your phone. Like let's just say you were looking for a given thing in a given area on your phone. This is how this operates, right? And I'm going to show you that. So if we type in Phoenix, where I'm at, and there's a lot of Phoenixes, so we'll just pick Arizona. And then there's kind of the heart of Phoenix. I can actually, and I'll show you on the map, I can expand out a little bit. So we'll just dive a little bit deeper here and we'll just say this is the radius, pretty big radius. And the name of my company is Content Marketing. So we're going to just type content, it's Content Marketing Media, but we're going to type Content Marketing. And then we're going to just say, for sake of argument, that we only want 25 results. And so exactly like you would do a Google search, which is kind of why I like it. But you can expand in, expand out. The one limitation I do know about this import is you can only do 200 at a time. So unlike LinkedIn profiles, you can do, depending on what plan you're on, up to 50,000 at a time. This one is capped at 200. So no, you could do 200 and then do another 200, right? But it's still free. So I take it for, what it's worth, right? And here we go. I have a filter on, so you're not seeing all the results. So let me take that off. And let's see if I can pick up on the content marketing ones here. We have a lot in here, don't we? Yeah, so, part of why I did that, right, is here's my company. There's some other companies in here. And so I'm just gonna kind of quickly walk you through. This is a big table, but the one thing that is very uniquely different about this is when you pull in this data from GPPs, as I mentioned in the beginning, you're not going to have the owner's name, right? And that is a limiter, right? So you got to come up with a way to find the owner. Now, I can tell you there are plenty of enrichments in Clay that allow you to do that, right? There's some ones that cross-reference the URL to LinkedIn. You could use ClayGent. There's a lot of different ways to do this. I intentionally did it completely different than that just to show you another way, to give you another tool in your toolbox. So this is the kind of data you're going to get. You get reviews, you get the map data ID, thumbnails, place ID. You need a website, right? Again, we need a website to get an email. You actually get phone numbers, which is pretty good because they're pretty accurate because it's what the company puts on their Google business profile for customers to call them. So it's generally pretty accurate. But in this case, what happens next is we dropped in the website that we got, and then we have a prompt here. And the prompt says, review the website to conduct Google searches to determine the business owner. Output only the first and last name you find, nothing else. Talking to it like a child because it's a large language model. And then your only output should be the first and last name. It should not be the business name, but a person. Okay. So that's the prompt I've found that works. again, you can tweak this prompt and you might actually get better results. But for me, this has worked pretty well. And what happens in here, as you can see, is we find a lot of business owners. Now, we don't find them all. Here's a sorry. Here's a I'm sorry. Here's Ray with no last name. But we do find a lot, right? And so what we do find, then we kind of filter. And again, this table, we set it up to run if we find an owner. So when you see like missing inputs, etc., that's when we couldn't find the owner. And then from there, we get some emails. So let's filter again here on email we did last time. And we'll just say it is not empty. All right, so we got some emails here, right? They look to be, aligned with the owner name we found. They all validated again. And then we run into essentially the rest of the same process. So, research, copy. So all this, when you look at this same approach, it does drive the cost up a little bit. So if you remember the last ones were like 0.11, 0.12. Some of these are 0.13, some of these are 0.16, even one here at 0.2. So this one capped it like 2.2 cents. What's driving this? And if I didn't mention in these costs, I actually put in the formula the cost of ICPs as well. So it's not just what's in the table, but the cost there. What's driving it is it costs a little money to find out who the owner is, right? Now, here's why I did it this way, because I promise you, if you try to do this with Claygent and your own API key or Clay credit, it's going to cost you a lot more than 0.004 or 0.008 or 0.003. Like it doesn't matter what plan you're on, one Clay credit doesn't cost 0.3%. Or even if you're using OpenAI, GPT-4 Omni or GPT-4 Turbo, they're all going to cost more than this. This is using Cohere to find the website and the owner's name based off the URL, right? So just wanted to give you a kind of a different way, but it doesn't mean you couldn't take this out and go in and try to find the owner using Claygent or another source, right? I just wanted to give you a way to do it differently. But all in all, this table works very, very similar to the last one, right? So we can find an email, we validate that email. And again, you can take this out. I was leaving it in to kind of test it just to make sure that we had independent validation from just ICPs, but zero bounce as well. And then we follow the same track, right? Where we go, let's get some research. Here's our research. And again, it doesn't matter that this is a small business. We're still getting highly detailed research on Manny's error, wherever Manny's error is, which I just literally pulled into the table. And then we take the same approach in our copy, but again, you can take whatever copy approach you want, use whatever model you want. But in summary, kind of what I wanted to show here is that I have seen multiple different ways to go about it. I see people go out and buy Google scrapes of 100,000 GBPs, but then they're all, and I've been asked this question, like, what do I do next, right? I got all this great data, but then how do I find their email, right? And it's like, do I submit it to provider A? Do I do this? Do I do that? And this is just one way to go about doing it. The diminishing return aspect of it is you're getting 20% of the ones that you're pulling in, but I don't mind that because I'm pulling them in for free, right? So it's not costing me anything to run a search, and it's only costing me when I find verified emails. And so let's kind of, that's really all I have with the demonstrations today. I will be sharing the tables this afternoon when the recording comes out. I'll post the recording and I'll post the tables. We did not get any time on Tuesday for people to really talk and ask questions. So I'm going to use the last 21 minutes for that. Before I just kind of open up the floor, I did want to address any questions that were in the chat. So I do see one. How accurate is it finding business owners, meaning percentage of the time is finding the correct name versus hallucinating and finding the wrong name? So my experience with this particular workflow, where we don't have the business owner's name and we're using Cohere, is that it's highly accurate, meaning that if it returns a result, like the names you see here, the reason why I know it's highly accurate and why I love Cohere is if you were to dive into the details of the table, you can actually see its rationale for coming up with this answer. And so sometimes it's very, very deep into, you got to kind of read through and you can import these as columns, right? So here's the search that it's doing. And then let's see here, chat history. So anyway, it's very somewhere in here. It's very much like ClayGen. It'll tell you like its citations. So I just have to find it, but that's the answer. Ultimately, Geo, to your question, which is I just have to find it. There's a lot of data in here, but there's the citation. Let's see if I can. Like there's 19 layer of details here, but in one of these columns, it tells you like its rationale, just like ClayGen does, and it'll say this is how I found it. Do you find the prospects respond positively to having an AI generate personalized lines versus just viewing it as fluff and seeing it through it as AI generated? Yeah, so a lot of good discussion on that particular topic. I have been, I don't know, like the one guy that's not afraid to tell everybody that I write all my copy with AI. So trust me, I have got it over and over again from anybody that you can imagine. And all I can tell you is that the way we do it, I have many, many clients that it works, right? And it's not just because we use AI, it's because we use models like Cohere. It's because we're always trying to use the better model that came out last week to generate more human-like copy. It's because our prompts are very, very long, well written, and tested. And like, I ran a campaign to promote this group starting on Friday all the way through Monday, and I got like 78 replies, and there's probably people in this call that because of that campaign. So, I do it. Here's my main reasons why I believe in AI. Number one is, just go watch OpenAI's video last week and see what it's capable of, right? It's changing the world. Number two, there are a lot of bad people that do AI. Not bad people. There are a lot of people that do AI bad, right? So that gives the rest of us a bad name, but we try not to do AI bad. And I think that's why it works. And we're very professional and non-salesy. That's our approach. Like, here's what we do. We know what you do. So we talk. That's it in a nutshell. I don't take that approach and coach my clients that way, but I will tell you, the way we do things is not always the best way. There's other people that do things and get results, right? So you just have to find what works for you, but it works for us. Yeah, thanks, Adam. I mean, I honestly believe the more time and effort and the better model you use, and before I send 10,000 emails using AI, I mean, I have rewritten the prompt 1,900 times, right? And tested it. And if you don't do this, I would highly recommend you do this. If you're using Clay or other tools or any kind of AI or any kind of prompts, like use yourself as your example. So like when I write prompts that call a website, that create copy, like I do that from the persona as if I was going to receive it. And most people, who's the most harshest critic of your business? You are, right? So if that stuff doesn't come out where it's good enough to send to you, then don't send it. And that's kind of my bar. So that's kind of how I go about it. Any ideas on how to scrape past LinkedIn attendees at scale? That's a good question. If you, Matt, if you message Lynn in the group, I'll share with you a guy that's done some scraping for me. I've never asked him to do that. But the couple times we've had him try to scrape things on LinkedIn that we couldn't scrape, he was able to. So that's, I don't want to dox him in the group because he's not like an official partner or anything, but that's kind of the way we went about it. Yeah, Jamie's note taker with a nice outro there. That's kind of cool. All right, so that's all the questions in the chat. So I think let me just see. Can somebody try to unmute themselves, and if they have a question, just see if there's anything they want. Anything. I mean, this group's for you, so we can talk about anything.
Yeah, can I? I wanted to ask about more local businesses, because often what I find is that even with ClayGent or Cohere, you can probably find some sort of email address, like particularly for medical practices. But they're usually info or contact or something like that. What is your experience running campaigns to emails like those?
Yeah, so I mean, we've run some campaigns for those niches. To your point about the email, though, like I haven't I've tried very, very heavily to find email addresses using large language models. I've been successful some of the time, but the vast majority of the time, honestly, that these models are built to try not to leak what they call PII. And you probably know that from a medical perspective. And they, for whatever reason, they don't like to give you email addresses. So I've built some tables where I've run like 1,000 of these searches and appended them to websites, and knowing that the email address was there, and yet I can't get the large language model to unmask it. So it'll give me the email address, but it'll mask the middle. So at least in the interim now, like this is the closest I've gotten to try to do this at scale, where it's like, okay, well, we'll just take the GBP or the LinkedIn profile for free, grab the website, and then try to find the owner that way. And they don't seem to mind to give us the owner, but the email address has been tough. Hopefully that answers your question, Colin.
Yeah, thanks. I've seen about 20% find rate if we just import it from LinkedIn. What helps is first just running it on a website and then doing a Google search for it and then making sure that you compare it to the domain of the actual website and then validating it again. So there's some tricks around it, but yeah, it is quite tricky.
Well, that's a great idea. And I'm glad you say that, right? Because this, like, very much, this is, not foolproof, right? And you saw like in these tables, right? It takes 100 rows to get 20 email addresses, right? So finding that balance it's a great idea. It's just like, hey, if I can find a way to still get 20 email addresses and they cost me, less than a penny or a penny and a half, and maybe I don't get the other 80, that still might be useful to people, right? So really good point. What else, guys?
Yeah, I have a question, Josh. What would you say is your favorite or the best way to find people at a list of companies?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great. I think I would use LinkedIn predominantly. It depends on how hyper specific I want it to be, because if I needed to, like, let's just say I had a list of 10 companies, I would probably take the time grant to like try to show those companies with a large language model to pull the names, because it was only 10 companies. But if I was doing like 10,000, for example, then I would say, okay, now I'm going to pull that in via LinkedIn. There's some aggregator tools as well that you could use to get more specific results easier. I mean, I think one of the things I've learned about, especially on the lead gen side, is there are 95 ways to skin the cat. And every single day I hear about a vendor I didn't even know exists. There's a tool I've used that pulls in like this ridiculous amount of data that shows like connections at the company and stuff like that. And so it's a really bad answer, Grant, but it's like, I guess in the simplest form, I would probably use this free LinkedIn import and then try to see how many of those emails I can find by role based, et cetera.
You'd import the companies into LinkedIn and then you'd set your search filters. And then how would you get that out of LinkedIn into Clay?
So I would do it directly in Clay. So in Clay,
Okay.
like I think I still have the screen up, you can do company searches or people searches, right? And both of these, depending on what plan you're on, you can go up to like 50,000 at a time for free. So I would start where I wanted to start and then do. So like if I start with, let me get back into that table that has LinkedIn in it here. So you could import, like here, we're just importing personal profiles. But what I could do if I wanted to is import companies. And then from importing that company, so if I had a company profile in here, then I'd have to use like other enrichments as well. So I could hit add enrichment, and then there's a whole bunch of enrichments that are built in. And you can find, openings at the company, employee head count, and people at the company. Like it's just on and on. But again, it's like everything else where you have to find that balance of what it's going to cost you from a Clay perspective versus, if you just dumped every person that worked at a company in a table.
Yeah. So if you scroll back up there, all those enrichments you can find for a list of companies that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, each one does something different, like headcount, growth, active job openings. But the one, I mean, that's kind of straightforward is that you dump in for free the companies you're interested in the LinkedIn. You have their company profile, and then you just use find contacts at company, which will then pull all the individual contacts at that company.
And are they like scraping LinkedIn like Phantom Buster? Or is this a database that they have that's updated like every 2 months or something?
My best understanding of it is it's an API replica of SalesNav, but it doesn't have everything that SalesNav has.
Okay.
Is from what I've seen in the forums, because I've definitely seen people say that they find stuff in SalesNav that they can't find in SimCore. So I think it's one of those costs, it's one of those cost benefit things where it's like, yeah, but at least I can dump every company table that I can find in here for free, right? So I should necessarily expect that it's going to be as good as SalesNav because that's not free, right?
Right. Cool, thanks.
Yeah, great question. We got about 9 more minutes. Anything else you guys can think of?
A question for you, if you don't mind, Josh.
Yeah, of course I don't.
Yeah, with regards to ops for tables, operations in general, do you have like a template for basically every possible client prospect list that you could imagine at this point, or do you kind of just go with the flow and create a table each time? I'm just wondering what your ops setup looks like at this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. So, I generally have my client stuff in their own instance. And so like if I were to hit this button, you would see all my different clients as instances and I could just switch to theirs. I structure my own and the clients as well, very much like you see on the screen. So like, here's my stuff. And I can't promise you I'm the most organized labeler, but you can kind of just see like when I build a new list, I date it, stuff like that. I do have a little bit of client stuff in there for someone that I don't have access to their clay. This is all my, let's see what the heck I can do because I'm bored list. And then the stuff where I actually share the table. I have that in one here, which this is probably where the biggest library is. So these are all of the workflows that I've either written about, posted about, shared, etc. And as you can see, they're kind of all over the board. So I think it's a long way to answer to your question, Adam, but I try to keep everything in the client's instance and then structure it in tables. I like to name like live tables that we're using to push to Instantly, Smartly, or whatever as production, and then date them. So it's very consistent. But I've also seen a lot of clay tables and a lot of clay instances, and they look a lot different than this, right? It's just everything everywhere. So I try to be a little bit more organized, and I just kept these two out because we're demoing today.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Do you know if Clay is like switched their stance on wanting a separate Clay account instance for every client, or if they're more open to having shared, your account would be where all your clients are stored? I know for a while they were kind of leaning towards having a separate account for each client.
Yeah, they're discussing it. I mean, I've just gone about where I've, asked the clients to give me access to it. That way it's still, if they decide they want to fire me tomorrow, they can just delete my access, right? They don't necessarily have a good, clean white label set up to that point, or a agency type setup. So I do know, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize this and there's a couple tables I actually need to fix from our list that's in there. That's the wrong button. But one of the things that I don't know that people actually take advantage of that they should is that when you share tables like this option here to share this link and then give us sample data, this gives the sample row. Like you don't just have to do this. And I think most people just try to share this table. You can actually share it to a specific email, and that kind of limits the access of it to only the person you gave the access to. So again, just little things that I picked up, but I'm sure they will address it at some point, Adam. I think it's not a focal point.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think from a couple like quality control type clients that I've had, they're very concerned about their data being leaked or sharing their tables with other other clients inside the instances. So
yeah. And I can see that, like, as and I've seen that with a lot of tech companies in the past, right? Is as they get more out of startup mode and more into like, I'm going to bring on some really, really big clients, like they have to make those kind of changes just because those clients, like I used to work for a big insurance company. Like before I was ever allowed to use a tool like this in the cloud, there were security reviews and all kinds of things. So yeah, your point's very valid, Adam. I just don't think they've made it there yet.
Yeah, thank you, Josh.
Yeah. 5 more minutes, guys. Any final thoughts or questions?
Yeah, one last follow-up question. Is Cohere cheaper than OpenAI for some of those things you were looking at?
Yeah, I think I actually saw that question in your chat. I forgot to answer it. It is yes and no. It really depends on what you're doing. On a general scale, I think it is. Like if you were just doing research for like what we're using for in this table to pull down detailed website data, yeah, I definitely think it's cheaper. But it really kind of comes down to what version of GPT you're using. I mean, if you're using GPT 3.5 Turbo, then that's always going to be cheaper because it's ridiculously cheap. I tell people, and if maybe this will kind of help think about large language models, at least with OpenAI, they really have the philosophy of make it better, make it cheaper. So when they released GPT-4 Omni, it was actually half the price of what GPT-4 Turbo is. So that's a really good thing. Is it's better tech at a less price. They've historically done that every time they release a new model. And I think Cohere kind of did the same thing. So there's another model that's supposed to be better, Command R Plus. I just didn't find it disconcertingly different, that it was worth using it. Like the results were that better. So, to your question, Grant, I think it's a great question is, I think with Tuesday, we talked about Open Router and all the different models you could use. When you're making those evaluations, you've got to make the decision on quality versus cost, right? And they are not making it easy to do that because they all charge something different per million input tokens and output tokens. Some of them throttle the speed by which you can do stuff, or make you pre-purchase credit, like Claude's notorious for that. Some of them, like Claude Opus and Clay, is 2 credits. I don't think you can even run. Can you run? I'm not sure. GPT-4 Omni with Clay credit chat. You can run it with your API, but I'm not sure. So it's like you almost have to be using one model just to know how much that cost. But as much as time allows, spend the time to figure out what model works at what cost point for you before you run 1,000 or 10,000 credits, because you probably could have done it cheaper and better if you chose the right solution for the right use case.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. The last thing I will do is promote the WhatsApp, just to remind people, like, there's some amazing conversations going on there that I literally have nothing to do with. Like I woke up this morning and there were like 60 conversations that went on last night, which is cool because that's reflective of this group. It's reflective of a genuine interest. And I am learning stuff from the group that I created a week ago. Like I'm seeing stuff from different people I had no idea, right? So that's exactly what I wanted it to be. And so if you're not there, join it. The instructions are in the consortium on how to get there. If you have any problems, send a message to Lynn or I. But hopefully the first week went well. We proved a little bit today with the communication channels and the chat and everything else. And so the last thing I'll leave you with in the last minute is you're not going to see my ugly mug every twice a week, right? I'm already talking with bringing in some true other experts, not just with Instantly and Clay, but people that know like things like relevance AI, people that know deliverability from an email perspective, some of the high-level people at some of the companies that we've talked about today, just inviting them in, not as a sales pitch, but to have a real conversation about what's going on with deliverability or, under that mantra. And I'm excited because hopefully we're providing value, and that was the whole goal in the first place. So enjoy your day. We'll keep to the time and appreciate all of you being here. Have a good rest of your week.